One of the tough problems facing our country is the traffic problem, especially the one prevailing in Bangkok. Admittedly, the flow of traffic is still interrupted at certain spots and at certain points in time, but at least there is a remarkable improvement to it. Cars are no longer brought to a complete standstill by traffic jams, as they used to be more than a decade ago. How did the improvement come about? What was the story behind a number of royal-initiated roads?
The sight of a man in police uniform executing his duty as midwife at the roadside is rather astonishing. In fact, it is a matter of life and death, a crucial moment for life inside the mother's womb that cannot wait for the green light.
The childbirth occurred in quite a melee. You know, a big crowd of onlookers gathered around. When the job was done, we got a round of applause. They said something like, "The King's traffic police are super," something to this effect.
Both policemen are affiliated with the Royal Initiated Traffic Alleviation Project. They had undergone a training course on midwifery given by Rajawati Hospital, the Royal Thai Police Hospital and the Krung Thep Hospital. The activity is an extension of the earlier Royal Traffic initiations 14 years ago. A number of records show how complicated the problems were at the analytical stage, but by the time the royal methods were put into practice, His Majesty used to simplify them so that they were easily understood by all concerned, including the general public. As a result, implementation proved to be easily enhanced too. The same applied to traffic problem alleviation under the auspices of Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, the BMA. Bangkok metropolis occupies a space of merely 1,500 square meters, but has to accommodate the needs of over 10 million residents. Almost every square inch of Bangkok serves as foundation for a clutter of crowded buildings, companies, department stores, government offices, and even factories. Rapid growth breeds disorderliness due to lack of city planning that has prevailed all through the years. In contrast to the ever-increasing number of cars on Bangkok streets, available space for traffic keeps diminishing. In 1982, an initial amount of 8 million baht from His Majesty's and the Princess Mother's private funds was graciously allocated to the Metropolitan Police Bureau for the acquisition of fast-moving motorcycles and walkie-talkies, along with royal advice and guidelines.
Our workforce was seconded from the Office of Traffic Control Police and then given proper training based on His Majesty's guidelines. The expenditure was covered by the royal funds.
The Royal Thai Police statistics show that 80% of traffic-related accidents, which intensifies the traffic problem even further, have their root cause in law and traffic regulation violations. For instance, drunk driving, jumping the lights and ignoring speed limits. It is His Majesty's view that to squarely address the fundamental problem and maintain peace and harmony among road users is to instill in everybody the need to be self-disciplined and to strictly observe the regulations. His Majesty himself has set a good example for this.
His Majesty picked the time to personally inspect traffic conditions in Bangkok. He made it a point to avoid the morning and evening rush hours. For example, during the nightly funeral rites of the Princess Mother, where His Majesty would attend the rites at the Grand Palace every night, choosing the time when the traffic was light, at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, staying about 2 hours before returning to the royal residence. Next, he allowed traffic on the other side of the road to flow slowly past the royal motorcade. Unless necessary, there would be no closing off of any road for his sake.
ขบวนเสด็จไม่ได้ช้าแล้วก็ไม่จำเป็นเราจะไม่มีการปิดถนน
The Royal-sponsored fast-moving motorcycles are to head straight to the site of traffic problems where emergency occurs, primarily to ease the traffic jam that ensues. His Majesty used to refer to the state of a traffic standstill as moving at the speed of 0 km/h. In any case, the royal guideline was derived from the normal practice of having police motorcycles lead the royal motorcade.
Disagreeing with the police practice of closing off the roads along the royal route, His Majesty ordered that it be discontinued if he was on a private mission. Instead of imposing the road closure, one police motorcycle would halt traffic at the intersection closest to the royal motorcade, while the others would proceed to the next intersections. Then, just as the royal motorcade passes the first intersection, the first motorcycle would rush ahead of the royal procession to repeat the mission at the third intersection, and so it goes. Sometimes His Majesty would question about the light traffic, as if suspecting the police had closed off the road and caused disturbance to his people.
สลับกันไปเงี้ยบางครั้งท่านเห็นถนนโล่งมากท่านยังรับสั่งถามทำไมถนนโล่งมากคล้ายๆนึกว่าพวกตำรวจนี่ไปปิดถนนแต่จนประชาชนนั่นนะ
Not only for strict compliance of the traffic law, but also to obtain cooperation between public and police to remedy traffic problems. Again, His Majesty plays an exemplary role on this too.
His Majesty always objects to too many royal vehicles in it, saying he does not wish to cause trouble to the people. The royal entourage is to include only those who need to be in it, and they should travel as a group in a minibus. Thus, the royal motorcade consists only of a leading police vehicle, the royal vehicle, a minibus, and then the trailing police vehicle.
The royal advice and financial support worth 12 million baht allocated in the first year of operation were to serve as a means towards merely a short-term solution of the problem. As it seems, the implementation has been satisfactorily carried out in accordance with the objectives His Majesty has set out. In the following year, the mobile unit was allocated an additional amount of royal support, together with 100 motorcycles more. Its scope of work was widened to include fast and urgent delivery of the sick persons, casualties of traffic accidents, or women with advanced pregnancy and about to give birth to the hospital.
We suddenly get the idea, as we had never done anything like this before. In all the years that we worked, such an idea had never dawned on us. His Majesty's thoughts made us feel awestruck. Of course, the people needed our help. There were cases where we could take the critically injured to the hospital in time. They felt deeply grateful and thanked us profusely. We told them that we belonged to the Royal Initiated Traffic Rescue Unit sent by the King.
At a later stage, if the work proves beneficial, the government will need to adopt it as a project and provide budgetary support so it will bear fruit. In addition to the initial operating fund of 12 million, I could provide some more, but that might make a habit of dependency. The task force should be established as a permanent project. Originally established as a task force rather resembling a royal-initiated pilot project, it now functions as the Royal-Initiated Division of Special Traffic Affairs and operates on a budget allocated by the government.
Working now for the Royal Initiated Traffic Project, my thinking has changed, in the sense that I need to ask myself, what am I assigned to suppress? When should someone be arrested? There are lots of ways to get people's cooperation. One way is to let them know our work style, that we are not always searching for the culprits. He said to me, I am gratified. I am glad to play an active part in solving the problems facing Bangkok. Besides, I happen to work with a good, strong team. It gave me great pleasure. I really had a good time, he said. Many of you out there may have heard about or even travelled on the roads built under His Majesty's initiation. Background stories attached to some of these roads are worth looking into, as they portray the principal concept of project as well as personal management. The stories truly present yet another aspect of His Majesty's ultimate talents, both technical and practical.
From the royal initiations to find the short-term solutions to traffic-related problems, His Majesty now moved on building a road where there had been none.
His Majesty would say, "It must be done. The advice that people should be disciplined drivers is not enough because I do not believe they would comply. But if we could convince them that this and that situation could be concretely remedied, they would calm down and be willing to observe the rules."
The first road construction project was the least complicated of all. A road was to be built in parallel with the southbound railroad track linking Isarao Pab Road with Jaran Sanidwong Road. The idea came up while His Majesty was on his way to visit the Princess Mother, who was in Sirirat Hospital, and drove by to have a rough survey of the area.
He subsequently sent me a map in sketch and instructed that I conduct a feasibility study of the plan.
The finding was in the negative because the site was under the jurisdiction of the State Railway of Thailand, which had entered into a concessionary contract with Hopewell Company Limited regarding the very site.
His Majesty's immediate response was, "I just knew I would get this sort of reply from you. At any rate, there is no telling when Hopewell would start constructing, or whether their plan on the Bangkok side of the river could be implemented. It might take them 3 years. If we invest here and right away, it would not be capital intensive, but rather cost effective, within 3 years then."
Even before the team could get down to business, His Majesty granted them a special audience on that same day.
His Majesty started off by telling us about his trips to the provinces. Sometime when new roads had been built, I said with the owners of the land who had been living there in hardship for ages without road nor access by car. One fine day, some complete strangers turned up and bought their land. Within months, a road emerged. The people were bitter because they felt they had been cheated. This is not right.
The royal hint was comprehensible on the part of the team. As a consequence, words went around rapidly that a royal-initiated road was to be constructed, and that is the background story of Sutawat Road. The name was given by His Majesty. The construction took altogether 3 months. Just as Sutawat Road was being built, the next project to increase road surface on Rajadamnern Avenue from the foot of Somdet Phra Pingklao Bridge to the Government Lottery Office was launched to alleviate the traffic jams. Actually, a budget of over 200 million baht was already allocated for the construction of an overpass by the BMA.
Accepting underpass, His Majesty started sketching something. After some time, the rough plan was entrusted to us. We submitted a draft proposal for his scrutiny. After a few corrections, His Majesty gave his approval and the construction started.
The cabinet sped up its efforts in compliance. The construction took only 2 months, using the cash advanced by His Majesty, as a government budget allocation could not be processed in time. His Majesty's solution superseded the BMA's underpass project, which would have taken 3 years to complete and proved to be very effective.
We were once asked by His Majesty, "Well, how do you like working with the King?" To which we all said we had had a great time. In fact, we went on to inform him that we wished it would never come to an end. His Majesty chuckled and told us not to worry, as a lot more was coming.
The next assignment was the expansion of Rajdamnern Avenue to solve the problem of the bottleneck situation at 3 different spots, which was to be carried out in harmony with the preceding projects. The Pan Phar Li Lat and Makawan Rangsan bridges were built in the reign of King Rama V. Architecturally, they feature steel lattice with fine design at the cast iron hand railing. The bridge is flanked by marble columns decorated with bronze designs. The Fine Art Department has put both bridges on the list of preserved National Historic Sites.
His Majesty repeatedly instructed that the cultural heritage be preserved, that these precious railings be kept in the original shape and form.
But the case of Makawan Rangsan Bridge proved more complicated, thus the team resolved to submit 2 drafts for His Majesty's decision. Draft 1, the widening of Makawan Rangsan Bridge, while Draft 2, the construction of 2 new bridges to run parallel with the original. It was after His Majesty had selected Draft 1 that the team found an unforeseen problem.
His Majesty insisted, on many occasions, "Prasert, each undertaking requires your personal survey of the site. You will get lots of constructive ideas out of it. In fact, I wish I could go myself, but that would be inconvenient." That's how His Majesty expressed his concern. If he went at night, he would not see the details. It had to be done in the daytime.
The survey did prove constructive. Bad news ensued on the part of the team. The final draft of the proposal, having been approved by His Majesty, was not in line with the actual physical conditions of the site. Worse still, no one dared to bring up the matter with His Majesty.
Of course, we were worried, very worried. So I finally made the decision to confess. I told His Majesty, "It was my fault for having submitted the proposal for your endorsement. I have, in the meantime, conducted a survey of the place. Now, I am of the humble opinion that perhaps we should build a bridge in parallel with the original, rather than widening them. A view from the top of the building confirms this. Aside from maintaining the beautiful landscape, we would also be able to squarely address the traffic problem." His Majesty listened to me and granted his consent.
The incident was a testimony of His Majesty's democratic approach in all aspects, and a lesson for the team that His Majesty is willing to listen to a well-grounded argument. Anyone who has the courage to put up such an argument is usually selected to work in the royal team on a continual basis. His Majesty's initiation and hard work continued without interruption, even during the royal trips to Sirirat Hospital to visit the bedridden and recuperating Princess Mother. It came to His Majesty's notice that the base of the Democracy Monument took up more space than necessary. Easing the edge of the roundabout back a bit, say 1 metre or so, would mean gaining 1 whole traffic lane more. One only needed to rearrange the lanes there to enhance a better flow of traffic.
His Majesty gave us the instruction. For the road surface gained, be sure you do something to make up to the monument, to compensate for the loss. Perhaps decorate it grandly to boost the physical outlook. So, you see how just he is, even in a case concerning only a material thing.
Sad to say, the most overcrowded road right now is Rama 9. And Rama 9 is myself. How terrible. Rama 9 happens to have a huge fan club. Everybody comes running to Rama 9, which causes an influx on the road, and it raises a problem for me to solve. The Royal-initiated road project for the area surrounding Rama 9 Road covers a construction of altogether 4 roads, which serves as a network linking them with Tiem Ruamit Road, Pechbury Tatmai Road, Pracha Utit Road, and a temporary frontage road running north and south of Rama 9 Road. The most complicated part of the work was no other than the stage of making the blueprint of the elevated road project for Borom Raja Chonani Road.
In this book, you can see His Majesty's handwritten markings to indicate Somdej Pra Pinklau Bridge, Arun Amarin Bridge, Jarun Bridge, etc., and the utterly confusing directions of traffic entering and exiting. His Majesty entrusted these to us, saying, "Ponder over it, see if you can come up with any solution."
As it turned out, none of our proposals met His Majesty's expectation. At long last, however, our practice of perseverance paid off. His Majesty finally granted his endorsement.
His Majesty was pleased, saying, "You must go have a look to see what actually prevails there." It was the usual royal instruction, and every time he would end it with, "You will get constructive ideas out of it."
Again, the survey of the site proved enlightening as he found himself face to face with a few impractical details that had been overlooked. The team had to request the audience to amend the proposal that had been submitted. The amendment involved relocation of the elevated road from side position to in the middle position on Borom Rad Chonani Road, the way it is today. His Majesty finally gave his consent. Since the amendment allowed for more traffic lanes on the elevated road, the team began to ponder over the feasibility of widening Somdet Pra Pinklau Bridge.
His Majesty reacted in the negative. He suggested that we reconsidered because it would be disastrous to the projects already planned and implemented at Rajadamnern Nai and Rajadamnern Klang avenues, in that the existing system would be overloaded. His Majesty then sketched a deviation which became the Rama 8 bridge today.
Surprisingly, the royal initiation that gave rise to Rama VIII Bridge occurred during the period when His Majesty was ill and had to be admitted at Sirirat Hospital. It was during that very period that the working team was able to comprehend the whole system that His Majesty had envisioned.
We began to see the link whereby each individual project would be connected to form a full-scale east-west network.
ก็เกิดโครงการจตุรทิศขึ้นมาตะวันออกตะวันตก
Each individual road that had kept us occupied all through a stretch of 6 years and for which a total expense of more than 4 billion baht had been incurred was finally fitted together. His Majesty gave us one assignment after another until the job was done in its entirety. What the team came to realize is a road system that comes with no charge or fee which links up Puttamonton with Rama 8 Bridge via the elevated road and then Rajdamnern Road, Sri Ayutthaya Road, Makassan Reservoir, Rama 9 Road and all the way through to the Bangkok-Chonburi motorway. At present, the latest piece to be fitted into the jigsaw is the Royal-initiated Industrial Ring Road project.
I'm convinced that His Majesty has the whole picture in mind from the beginning. Only, he started off with the least complicated assignment as a test piece to evaluate our calibre. He used to say giving too many assignments at once might stun the team members to the point that they could not or would not carry them out. His strategy was to monitor each project implementation progress. He kept all the data and so was able to accurately estimate the date of completion of each individual project, how the whole picture was taking shape and so on. If this had been someone else, the puzzle would not have been solved the way His Majesty did. No one else would have had the capacity. His Majesty's interests are not restricted to only transport and communications. Being a visionary person, His Majesty's areas of concern includes energy, particularly oil, which stands at the core of national development, since our country is incapable of producing oil, how then can we become partly self-reliant or be able to survive in the face of an energy shortage, at least to a certain extent?
If fuel oil is depleted, we can rely on alternative energy. It's possible, but we will have to be determined in the effort to find ways to generate them. In 2003, all vehicles at the Royal-initiated Pekin Tong Development Study Centre ran on biodiesel produced at the centre. Feedstock came from the centre's own oil palm experiment plots, which incidentally were byproduct of His Majesty's successful method to remedy the acidic water-sodden peat soil prevailing in the far south. Fully integrated biodiesel production is now going on at the centre, starting from plantation, processing, extracting to distilling and distributing, to fishing villages and small-size fishing enterprises in Narathiwat province on a trial basis.
Those who have used biodiesel from our centre say the motor starts up easily. This is because biodiesel contains more oxygen than normal diesel. Its main attributes include easy startup, smooth running of the car engine and sweet-smelling exhaust.
Back in 1975, after His Majesty paid a visit to the southern region, research work by a group of the teaching staff of the University of Songkhla got unobtrusively underway, with the aim to produce biodiesel from palm oil, based on His Majesty's guidance and suggestion.
His Majesty specified that palm oil be used. To start off, he envisioned a small-sized enterprise, so that minor farm operators would be able to conduct a joint venture business. Almost 30 years later, His Majesty still confirmed his conviction that palm oil was to be used as a substitute for diesel oil.
His Majesty's interest in the project lasted all through the research years. He visited the centre on many occasions to follow up on the project development, which was found to be quite satisfactory.
His Majesty instructed that an experiment site be built in a selected agricultural community. That is how the Owl Look settlement cooperatives in Krabi province came into being.
At long last, research work solely by Thai scholars on the Royal-initiated production of biodiesel from palm oil paid off in 1991.
Ours was the world's only palm oil distillery. Before, palm oil had been used only in cooking. We developed our own production technologies, and, if I may add, no wastewater was released in the course of production.
None of the machinery and equipment at our distillery, refinery or biodiesel plant was imported. They were designed by researchers and scientists and manufactured in Hat Yai. The whole operations were possible despite limited budget allocation, a fact that applies to the Royal-initiated projects.
Behind the success story was a group of people who persevered and struggled on, determined to make the best out of the limited resources available. At any rate, our work must go on. We are not satisfied with what has been achieved so far. Our future achievements must be even greater and better.
ทำได้ณปัจจุบันนี้เรายังคิดว่าเราจะต้องทำให้มันดีกว่าแล้วก็ดียิ่งขึ้นไป
On the contrary, our country does not need to rely on the future outcome of any research work or pay sky-high prices in exchange of advanced technologies from abroad. The reason is because success in the past constitutes an array of proactive measures to cope with the current crisis brought on by the high prices of oil. One of these is the Royal-initiated project to produce biodiesel from palm oil.
Crude oil and gas are commonly known as sources of energy, but in fact energy can also be generated from a wide variety of natural sources. Whether or to what extent this can be done depends on the degree of human intelligence and capability.
Through a petition from one of his subjects in Konkan province, His Majesty's attention was directed to an old sluice, in lieu of which the petitioner hoped to see a permanent dam being constructed.
I was shocked because never in my life had something like this happened to me. I was told to step forward in front of everybody, and they pointed at me saying, "He's the one." Am I going to be punished or what? I asked myself.
Referring to the data on his map and observing the topographical features around him, His Majesty was convinced that the existing potentials would enhance a far better solution to the problem than the petitioner had expected.
Previously, the people had had to rely on a kind of rock dam, somewhere down below. But it could only temporarily hold back the water. With the floods, the dam repeatedly collapsed. Moreover, the water level in the reservoir was too low to irrigate the fields.
Given his wide diversity of profound knowledge and expertise, instead of instructing his team to help repair the dam as requested by the petitioner, His Majesty opted for the construction of drainage water gates to control the water level in the Chuan River. As the water gates were built at a higher level than the original dam, he relied on optimized collaboration between gravity and natural water power in forcing water down the delivery channel to nurture cultivation in low-lying areas. It was earlier in the year when we visited the area. The water level in the irrigation channel was still sufficient to nurture cultivation in both Chumpe District, Konkan Province, and Konsan District, Chayapum Province. What the petitioner had not foreseen was the money he could save, as the pumping machine was no longer needed, and therefore no more cost was incurred in this regard.
Cultivation of the second rice crop becomes possible. The water supply reaches all farms, from the sugar factory here to canals way over there. After the date of release, we know exactly the spot where the water mass will reach on the first day, the third day, the fifth day. Right on target. It works.
The royal-initiated Huaizhou Reservoir in the middle of Ban Pong Valley serves as a water source in Chiang Mai, but the adverse effect of illegal logging going on there was beginning to be felt as the volume of water permeating into the reservoir was on the decline.
Reforestation had to be accelerated to remedy the situation, His Majesty said. The objective was to grow trees and plants that absorbed more and more water. We set out to implement it immediately, along the guidelines His Majesty had given.
In 1995, His Majesty made another extended trip to monitor the progress at Huaizhou Reservoir, his fourth visit. It seemed the forests had been revived to a certain extent, but similar to his traffic projects, reforestation was but a piece in a whole jigsaw.
His Majesty took note of the rise in the water level. Now, with a filled-up reservoir, we should move on to build a wet forest. His Majesty's concept was to find a way to rehabilitate this forest by pushing up the water from the reservoir to high grounds and then release it downward.
โดยให้เอาน้ำในอ่างเก็บน้ำห้วยโจ้เนี่ยนะครับขึ้นไปข้างบนแล้วก็ปล่อยลงมา
Drawing water up to high grounds from a lower source is to reverse the force of gravity. Thus, one needs energy to pump the water up. Considering that water has to be transmitted to the cultivated area anyway, and that an excess of water power can turn the water turbine which forces water upwards. From the water retention station at the top of the hill, water is gradually and steadily released to spread moisture throughout the forest up above. In the final stage, water will permeate the soil and find its way down and back into the reservoir.
Actually, energy is conserved in the process because there is no use of electricity or fuel. Potential energy from water is converted to kinetic energy, which turns the turbine. That's how water is pushed up to the hilltop. In this way, energy is derived purely from nature, i.e., from water power.
A whole wealth of energy is waiting to be explored. To what extent these natural sources of energy can be utilized to benefit development work depends on the extent to which nature's mysteries can be solved by man-made technologies, and collaboration with these as yet unseen forms of energy can be realized. As it is, the wind god of ancient belief has been accorded the task of turning the rotor attached to a generator for man's practical use. Similarly, solar heat has been converted into electric and many other forms of energy. Given the fact that such conversions of the multitude potentials in nature may clean up the Earth's atmosphere, caution must still be in effect to ensure gradual speed of development expansion. Having profound knowledge of the Thai social geography, His Majesty's concept on alternative energy has been translated into simple methods which have undergone tests and experiments by the Royal Chitlada projects, as well as the Royal Development Study Centres. This involves a different aspect of alternative energy, which is to generate use out of useless things. Manure, for example, is useful material for fertilizer and also for the production of biogas. Agricultural scraps are a source of profit when used to produce green fuel, which may not be as practical as natural gas, electricity or fuel oil, but presents an alternative for those living in remote areas so that they can become self-reliant in the face of oil price fluctuations.
The subject of alternative energy has been close to His Majesty's heart for many decades. A lot of efforts have gone into promoting the self-sufficiency approach, so that we will not have to always rely on imports. But the people on their part sometimes deviate from the principle of self-reliance and opt for convenience.
เป็นนำเข้าจากต่างประเทศมานานแล้วนะครับแต่ว่าเราเองนั้นก็ต้องยอมรับว่าบางครั้งเราก็อาจจะเผลอไผลหลงไหลไปบ้างนะฮะไปติดยึดกับความสะดวกสบายต่างๆจนกระทั่งลืมแนวคิดที่จะพึ่งตนเอง
Human beings have come to rely on various forms of energy, all of which have an impact on society as a whole in one way or another. What you just saw were illustrations of the self-sufficiency concept as far as energy is concerned. Every project is based on rationale, step by step, carefully and comprehensively implemented. It is risk-free, financially and technologically self-reliant, and initiated for our benefits and our own future. But whether this can be materialized depends on how and to what extent we can follow in His Majesty's footsteps.